Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that owning a home in Australia is no longer possible. Right now, millions of families are being pushed out of the housing market, not because they're lazy, not because they didn't work hard enough, but because the system is breaking down. Here's a shocking fact. Australia now has some of the highest household debt in the world, while rents are rising faster than wages, inflation, and even basic living costs. Families with full-time jobs are sleeping in cars, garages, and overcrowded homes, and experts warn this is only the beginning. So how did one of the world's most stable housing markets reach this point? Why are homeowners panicking, renters desperate, and first-time buyers completely locked out? In this video, we'll uncover 10 powerful reasons behind Australia's housing collapse and why ignoring them could put your future at risk. Stay till the end, because this crisis is closer than you think.
Just a few years ago, borrowing money in Australia felt cheap, easy, and almost risk-free. Interest rates were at historic lows, and families were encouraged to buy homes with the promise that repayments would stay manageable. But that promise didn't last. In a very short time, interest rates shot up at record speed. For many Australian households, this was like a financial earthquake. Mortgage repayments didn't rise by a few dollars. They jumped by hundreds or even thousands of dollars every month. Families who were already stretched suddenly found themselves drowning. Here's the scary part. Most Australian home loans are variable rate mortgages. That means when rates go up, repayments rise immediately. There's no buffer, no grace period. One rate hike can completely destroy a household budget. Imagine this. A family that once paid $2,500 a month on their mortgage is now paying $4,000 or more. That extra money has to come from somewhere, so people cut back on food, health care, education, and even heating. For many, that still isn't enough. As a result, forced sales are increasing. Homeowners who can't keep up are being pushed to sell, often at the worst possible time. This adds more properties to the market, driving prices down and trapping families in negative equity, where their home is worth less than the loan. Interest rates were meant to control inflation. Instead, they've become a wrecking ball, smashing through household finances and turning the dream of home ownership into a nightmare. And this is only the first domino in a much bigger housing collapse. Australia isn't just facing a housing problem, it's facing a debt disaster. For years, families were told that taking on large loans was normal, even smart. Low interest rates made massive mortgages seem safe, but now that mountain of debt is turning into a financial prison. Today, Australian households carry some of the highest debt levels on the planet, mostly tied to housing. This means even a small change in interest rates can cause huge financial pain. When rates rise, heavily indebted families feel it first, and they feel it the hardest. Think about it like this. If you owe a little, a rate increase is uncomfortable. If you owe a lot, it can be devastating. Many households are spending more than half of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. That leaves almost nothing for emergencies, savings, or the future. This debt trap also removes choice. Families can't easily move, change jobs, or downsize because selling might mean losing everything. Some are stuck in homes they can no longer afford, hoping conditions improve while pressure keeps building. Even worse, high debt creates a chain reaction. When people stop spending, small businesses suffer, jobs become less secure. Financial stress spreads through the economy like a slow-moving virus. The most dangerous part? This debt didn't appear overnight. It built up quietly over years of rising prices and easy credit. Now, with higher rates and rising living costs, that debt has become a ticking bomb. Australia's housing market isn't collapsing because people borrowed too much by choice. It's collapsing because the system pushed them to the edge, then pulled the rug out from under them.
We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Share them in the comments and join the conversation. We put hours of effort into making these videos, so subscribe to our channel. It's just one click to stay informed and support us. For decades, Australians believed in a simple promise: work hard, earn more, and life gets better. But when it comes to housing, that promise has quietly collapsed. While home prices skyrocketed, wages barely moved, and that gap has become catastrophic. Housing prices in major Australian cities didn't just rise, they exploded. In some areas, prices doubled or even tripled within a single generation. Meanwhile, wages grew slowly, often failing to even keep up with inflation. This means that every year, buying a home became harder, not easier. For first home buyers, the numbers are brutal. Saving for a deposit now takes decades, not years. Rent eats up income, living costs keep rising, and there's almost nothing left to save. Many young Australians are doing everything right: full-time jobs, side hustles, strict budgets, yet home ownership remains out of reach. This wage-to-house price gap has created a dangerous divide. Those who bought property years ago saw their wealth grow without effort, while those locked out are falling further behind. It's no longer just a housing issue, it's a generational crisis. Families are delaying major life decisions. People are postponing marriage, children, and even basic stability because they can't secure housing. Some are forced to live with parents well into adulthood, not by choice, but by necessity. What makes this worse is that rising interest rates hit hardest when wages are weak. Without income growth, households have no cushion, no flexibility, no escape. The result? A housing market that no longer reflects real earning power, but instead runs on debt, speculation, and pressure. And when prices disconnect from wages for too long, collapse becomes inevitable. This imbalance didn't happen by accident, and unless it's fixed, the damage will last for generations. Renting in Australia was once seen as a temporary phase, a stepping stone toward home ownership. Today, it's becoming a trap. Rental prices are rising so fast that even middle-income families are being pushed to the edge. In many cities, rents have jumped by hundreds of dollars a week in just a short period. For renters, there's no warning and no protection. One lease renewal can suddenly make a home unaffordable overnight. Families are forced to choose between paying rent and paying for food, transport, or medical care. The alarming part? This isn't only affecting the unemployed or vulnerable. Nurses, teachers, tradies, and office workers are all feeling the pressure. People with full-time jobs are lining up at rental inspections, competing against dozens, sometimes hundreds of others for the same property. As competition increases, landlords gain all the power. Renters feel scared to complain about repairs, mold, or unsafe conditions because they fear eviction. Some accept overcrowded or unhealthy homes just to avoid becoming homeless. And when rent consumes too much income, the fall is fast. Families start skipping meals, children move schools repeatedly, stress and anxiety rise. Eventually, some end up living in cars, motels, or couch surfing with relatives. This rental crisis also blocks the path to ownership. When most income goes to rent, saving for a deposit becomes impossible. People are stuck renting longer, which drives rental demand even higher, creating a vicious cycle. What we're seeing now is not a normal market shift, it's a human crisis unfolding in slow motion. Exploding rents are no longer just about money, they're tearing apart families, communities, and the very idea of housing as a basic need. And sadly, this pressure is still building. At the heart of Australia's housing crisis lies a simple but devastating problem. There are not enough homes. While demand keeps climbing, housing supply has fallen dangerously behind, and the gap is getting wider every year. For years, new home construction failed to match population growth. Planning delays, strict zoning laws, and slow approvals turned housing development into a bureaucratic nightmare. Even when projects were approved, many never reached completion. Then came rising construction costs. The price of materials like timber, steel, and concrete soared, while skilled labor became harder to find. Builders were forced to absorb losses or pass costs on to buyers. Many couldn't survive. Construction companies collapsed mid-project, leaving families with half-built homes and massive debts. This shortage puts enormous pressure on both buyers and renters. Fewer homes mean fierce competition, higher prices, and less choice. Families end up settling for properties far from work, schools, or medical care, adding transport costs and stress to daily life. What makes this worse is timing. Just as supply slowed, demand surged. Population growth, smaller household sizes, and more people living alone all increased the need for housing. But supply remained stuck in the past, unable to respond fast enough. This imbalance creates a fragile market. When supply is tight, prices become volatile. Any shock, interest rates, economic downturns, or investor pullouts causes sudden swings that hurt everyday families the most. Housing shortages don't just raise prices, they weaken communities. Overcrowding increases, infrastructure gets stretched, and social tension grows as people compete for a basic necessity. Australia's housing crisis isn't only about affordability, it's about availability. And until supply catches up with reality, the market will remain unstable, unfair, and dangerously close to breaking point. This shortage isn't a future problem, it's happening right now, and its consequences are being felt everywhere. Australia's population is growing faster than its housing system can handle, and the pressure is becoming unmanageable. In a short period of time, the country has welcomed a massive influx of new residents, but the number of available homes simply hasn't kept up. Population growth isn't a bad thing on its own. It can boost the economy and fill labor shortages. But when housing, transport, and infrastructure aren't prepared, the result is chaos. Demand for homes rises instantly, while supply takes years to respond. This sudden demand hits the rental market first. More people looking for homes means more competition, higher prices, and fewer choices. Long-term renters find themselves competing with new arrivals, students, and workers, all chasing the same limited number of properties. Cities feel this strain the most. Inner-city rentals disappear quickly. Suburbs become overcrowded. Families are pushed further and further away from job centers, spending more time and money commuting just to survive. This pressure doesn't stop at housing. Schools fill up. Hospitals become overwhelmed, public transport struggles, but housing remains the biggest stress point because without a stable home, everything else begins to fall apart. What makes this situation dangerous is the speed. Population numbers surged faster than governments and developers could adjust. Housing construction didn't accelerate in time. Planning systems stayed slow. The result? A market pushed past its limit. This imbalance fuels resentment and fear. People start blaming each other instead of the system that failed to plan ahead. Meanwhile, rents climb, availability shrinks, and homelessness rises. Housing isn't just about walls and roofs, it's the foundation of social stability. When population growth overwhelms housing supply, cracks appear everywhere. Australia's housing market isn't collapsing because people want to live here. It's collapsing because growth happened without preparation, and now everyday families are paying the price. For years, property investors were a major force in Australia's housing market. They bought homes, rented them out, and relied on rising prices to make a profit. But now that equation has changed, and the consequences are hitting renters the hardest. Rising interest rates have crushed investor returns. Mortgage repayments increased, tax benefits became less attractive, and holding a rental property suddenly turned into a financial burden.
Many investors made the same decision at the same time: sell. When investors exit the market, rental properties disappear. Homes that once housed families are sold to owner-occupiers or left empty during long sales processes. This shrinks the rental pool even further, making an already tight market even tighter. For renters, this means fewer options and higher prices. With less supply available, landlords who remain can raise rents aggressively. Tenants have little power to negotiate. If they can't afford the increase, someone else will. There's also the emotional toll. Families are forced to move with little notice. Children change schools. Communities are broken apart. The fear of eviction becomes constant, especially when investors decide to cash out quickly. Some people assume investor sell-offs should lower housing prices. In theory, yes, but in reality, many of these homes are bought by higher-income households, not struggling renters. The people who lose the most are those who don't have the savings or credit to buy. This creates a painful paradox. Investors leave because costs are high, but their exit makes housing less affordable for everyone else. A stable housing system needs balance between investors, owners, and renters. Right now, that balance is collapsing, and as investors continue to pull out, renters are left fighting over fewer homes, higher rents, and no safety net. This isn't a market correction, it's a housing squeeze, and it's tightening fast. Australia's construction industry was once seen as a backbone of the housing market. Today, it's becoming one of the weakest links. Builder collapses are rising, and the damage they leave behind is devastating for families caught in the middle. Across the country, construction companies are going bankrupt before homes are completed. Rising material costs, fixed-price contracts, labor shortages, and supply delays have squeezed builders until they simply couldn't survive. When they collapse, projects stop instantly. For families building their first home, this is a nightmare scenario. They've paid deposits, they're paying rent, and in many cases they're already paying a mortgage, all for a house that doesn't exist yet. Some are left with half-built structures exposed to weather, vandalism, and decay. The financial stress is overwhelming. Insurance doesn't always cover the full loss. Legal battles drag on for years. Many families burn through their savings just trying to restart construction, if they even can. This crisis also slows future housing supply. When builders fail, fewer homes get completed. Developers become cautious, lenders tighten rules, projects are delayed or canceled altogether, worsening the housing shortage. Confidence in new builds is collapsing. Buyers are scared to sign contracts. Investors pull back. The system starts feeding on its own fear, creating a cycle of delay, distrust, and higher costs. The emotional toll is just as severe. Families put their lives on hold, delaying children, careers, and stability while waiting for homes that may never be finished. Construction failures don't just affect individual households, they shake the entire housing ecosystem. Every unfinished home is one less place for a family to live. Until the construction sector stabilizes, Australia's housing crisis will keep deepening, leaving more families stuck, stressed, and stranded in a system that promised them security but delivered uncertainty instead.
It's not just mortgages, debt, or rent driving Australia's housing collapse. It's the broader cost of living crisis. Families are being squeezed from every direction, and housing is often the first thing to give way. Food, fuel, electricity, and gas prices have all risen sharply over the past few years. Even with full-time jobs, families are finding that every dollar is accounted for. Mortgage or rent payments, once manageable, now compete with the cost of basic survival. For many, it's impossible to keep up. Imagine working long hours just to afford the essentials, only to see your mortgage increase, your rent rise, or your home's value drop. That's the reality for millions of Australians. The stress isn't just financial, it's emotional. Parents skip meals so children can eat.
Families cut medical expenses or postpone urgent repairs. Sleep and mental health suffer. In extreme cases, homelessness becomes a very real threat. The cost of living crisis also amplifies other housing problems. Even small shocks, a car repair, medical bill, or interest rate rise can push a family past their breaking point. People who were once comfortably housed are suddenly at risk of eviction or forced sale. What makes this situation dangerous is its pervasive nature. Unlike one-off financial mistakes, rising living costs affect nearly every household. It's a silent but relentless pressure that leaves no margin for error. Housing affordability isn't just about home prices. It's about whether families can survive day to day while paying for shelter. And right now, in Australia, the cost of living is making that impossible for millions. This pressure is a critical driver of homelessness and market instability, and it shows no signs of easing. The final piece of Australia's housing collapse puzzle is government policy, or more accurately, the lack of effective policy. Over the years, decisions at both state and federal levels have favored investors and developers, while ordinary families continue to struggle for basic shelter. The result? A housing market that is rigged, unstable, and increasingly unaffordable. One major issue is the focus on short-term fixes rather than long-term solutions. Policies such as temporary subsidies, grants for first home buyers, or tax incentives for investors may provide brief relief, but they do little to address the root problems: rising interest rates, insufficient supply, and wage stagnation. Often, these policies benefit those who are already wealthy, rather than helping families who are locked out of the market entirely. Zoning and planning laws are another failure point. In many cities, restrictive zoning prevents new homes from being built where they are most needed. Local governments delay approvals for new developments, creating artificial scarcity that drives prices up further. Even when construction projects are approved, delays in permits, inspections, or infrastructure support often stall progress for years. The cumulative effect of these policies is devastating. Ordinary Australians face skyrocketing housing costs, rising homelessness, and a system that seems to reward speculation over stability. At the same time, political debates focus on blaming immigrants, renters, or young people, diverting attention from the systemic failures that actually caused the crisis. Without strong, coordinated action, from building more homes to improving regulations and supporting families in need, the crisis will continue to worsen. Government policy has the power to stabilize markets, protect renters, and make housing attainable again. But right now, it's doing the opposite, accelerating the collapse. This failure is the final domino in a chain of problems, and it shows that the Australian housing market isn't just struggling, it's structurally broken. Families aren't just facing unaffordable homes, they're facing a system that doesn't have their back. Here's a strong, engaging conclusion, 200 words, and solution section, 300 words, for your video script, keeping the tone dramatic, informative, and relatable.
Australia's housing market is facing a crisis unlike anything we've seen in decades. Skyrocketing interest rates, record household debt, and stagnant wages have combined to make home ownership a distant dream for millions. Add to that exploding rents, construction failures, population growth, and policy missteps, and the result is a perfect storm pushing families into financial distress and homelessness. This isn't just about numbers or property prices, it's about real people. Parents choosing between rent and food, young couples delaying families, children forced to move schools repeatedly. Millions are being trapped in a system that seems designed to fail them. And the scary truth? Many of these problems are interconnected. One domino falls and the next one crashes down. The housing shortage, the investor pullout, and the cost of living crisis are feeding off each other, creating an unstoppable cycle.
The question now is not just why is this happening, but what can we do before the damage becomes irreversible? Because without action, the dream of stable housing for ordinary Australians may soon be completely out of reach. While the crisis is severe, it's not hopeless. There are steps that governments, communities, and individuals can take to stabilize the housing market and protect families. Increase housing supply. Fast-track approvals for new housing projects, invest in social and affordable housing, and encourage sustainable developments. Expanding supply reduces competition and helps lower prices over time. Support first-time buyers. Introduce targeted grants and low-interest loan programs that actually help families enter the market rather than benefiting investors or wealthier buyers. Protect renters. Enforce stronger tenant protections, limit excessive rent hikes, and provide subsidies for those struggling with housing costs. Renters need stability to avoid homelessness. Wage growth and cost of living relief. Policies that boost incomes or reduce living costs help families afford housing without sacrificing essentials like food, health, and education. Stabilize the construction industry. Support builders with financial incentives, reduce red tape, and ensure projects are completed on time to prevent unfinished homes from leaving families stranded. Taken together, these solutions can slow the collapse, provide relief to struggling families, and rebuild trust in the housing system. While change won't happen overnight, coordinated action can prevent millions more Australians from losing their homes and restore the dream of stable housing for generations to come. The Australian housing crisis affects us all, and we want to hear your story. Have you or someone you know been impacted? Check out our previous video to see how the cost of living is changing everyday life. We put hours of research and effort into these videos to bring you the truth, so support us by subscribing. It's just one click to stay informed and join the conversation.